Today we'll talk about a very vital evaluation tool. This tool is a teacher's appraisal. It's a tool that can be used by coordinators and supervisors to see how teachers perform inside the class. And this tool is called Nelson Framework. This evaluation tool consists of 4 domains and 13 elements. Domain number 1 is planning and preparation. Domain number 2, class environment. Domain number 3, instruction. Domain number 4, professional responsibilities. In domain number 1, planning and preparation, it has 3 elements. Number 1, demonstrating knowledge of content and pedagogy. As a teacher, you need to be professional. You need to be outstanding. You need to be qualified. And in order to do this, you should be aware of the material you're going to teach. You should be good at the methods of teaching you will use in order to deliver the ideas and the skills to the students. So the first step that can help you to be evaluated well is to have good knowledge of the materials you teach and the method or the strategies, the tactics, the techniques you use in order to deliver the material to the students. When I say you should be aware of the content here, the material, the curriculum, the lessons, the units, you should be aware of the material inside this curriculum. And when I say pedagogy, I mean that you need to know something about the methods, especially the recent methods of teaching, like collaborative learning, active learning. You need to have an idea about project-based learning, about task-based learning, about inquiry-based learning. You need to know something about the blended education, how to divide the class into groups, how to break the class into pairs or small groups or whole group, and how to be just a facilitator and a guide, not a teacher. You are no longer the only source of information in the class. Students nowadays have a good idea, and some of the students have good idea about the lesson you are going to teach. So just to focus on the students and let your curriculum be problem curriculum based. This means that the students are to be engaged in groups in order to share ideas and to work together collaboratively. So here we are talking about the lesson plan units. We are talking about how to behave inside the class and how to ask and how to receive answers from the students at the same time. It's your way of explaining the new material to the students. Are you a lecturer? Do you deliver lectures, or you give your students skills? This is very important, because if you are just a lecturer, so you will be the only authority in the class, and no one will participate with you in a good way. If you are a facilitator and a guide, this means that you give a good opportunity to your students to act and to behave and to show their attitudes in learning. So what I can say to you right now is to develop yourself, is to read, is to have a good background of the content and the methods of teaching. It's not enough to know about methods. It's not like reading about swear. It is just you are not just reading, you are implementing, you are performing, you are applying, you drive your students to do something in the class. So when you read about a method or a strategy, when you read about a tactic or technique, you make sure that you will be able to apply this in the class. The element number 2 in domain number 1, designing coherent instruction. Lessons that support the instructional outcomes, instructional maps, indicating relationships to prior learning, activities that represent a high level of thinking. Here you plan. You don't just plan in the lesson notes only, but you plan in your mind, and you do this in the class. You have to prepare your lesson, and you have to prepare it in a good way, in a practical way. Then when you are in the class, you should know how to behave and how to go according to a map in your mind, especially when you give time to every segment of the lesson. The third element in the first domain is designing students' assessments. Assessment is a good tool, evaluating the students, not you. And sometimes when we go and we see the type of assessment, we can judge you too, because it's your own way to be sure that the students acquire and be able to use the skills you deliver to them during the lesson or not. And in order to design a good assessment, you need to know something about the assessment policy in your school. You need to know about the assessment criteria you will use to evaluate your students. And at the same time, you should have a good background of the types of assessment, whether it is formative or summative assessment. Most of the assessments done inside the class are formative assessments. I mean the homework, the quizzes, the verbal questions, the oral ones, the projects, the presentation. All these are formative assessment. But when you have in your mind a mark, or you are grading your students, so you resort to the summative assessment. The assessment at the end of the period is a tool that makes you sure that your students acquire and are able to use the skills they got or not. So in a nutshell, easily, I want to tell you that the first domain of the evaluation tool or the teacher's appraisal is planning and preparation. And in this domain, there are three elements. Number one, demonstrating the teacher himself. The teacher demonstrates knowledge of content and pedagogy. Number two, designing coherent instruction. And number three, designing students' assessment. Domain number two, class environment. And in this domain, there are four elements. The class environment is the theater on which you act, you and your students. It is the most important part in the school, the class environment. And actually, I recommend Eliot for you to read and to have a good idea about the different environments in Eliot, the effective learning environment observation tools that is used inside the class and created by the teacher for the students and observed by the coordinator. In order to create an environment of respect and rapport, you need to be a model. You need to be an example to your students. You should have respectful talk. The students should be active listeners, and at the same time you use your body language inside the class, and you should be fair. You should be fair. Managing the classroom procedures, we'll talk about this. I'm talking about the class routines. I'm talking about limited time. I'm talking about the important rule done by the students inside the class. Also, we talk about the students' behavior. There should be some kind of standards of conduct in the class. You should know the number of absentees in the class, and you have your own reactions accordingly. Also, here we need to know something about how to organize the physical space inside the class. Let me talk about this in details. In the second domain, we talk about the class environment. As I told you, that the best way to know about how to create your own classroom environments, you need to resort to Eliot. It has 7 environments. One of the best environments that can be created inside the class is the equitable learning environment. Then the high expectations environment, the supportive learning environment, the active learning environment, progress monitoring environment, and also the digital learning environment. You need to be aware of these different environments to be able to control and to manage the class, because it's good to have an idea about class management and time management inside the class. So in domain number 3, we have 4 elements. Number 1, creating an environment of respect and rapport. Number 2, managing classroom procedures. Number 3, managing student behavior. And number 4, organizing a physical space. And here in this element regarding the physical space, you need to pay much attention to the classroom layout, the ventilation, the space among desks, the areas you move and your students move inside the class, so as to be able to give, and so as to let your students, or to make your students feel comfortable and safe. in domain 3, instruction. And instruction is the bag of methods of teaching you use in the class. It depends on the way you teach, it depends on your personality, it depends on the levels, the different levels of the students inside the class, and it depends on your character and your personality inside the class. You need to be a lecturer, or you need to be a facilitator or a guide. What kind of methods you are going to use? First of all, you have to think of the lesson objective, the smart lesson objectives, the objectives that will be delivered to the students, and the students will be able to carry out it. How they can carry out the objectives, how they can fulfill the skills and the objectives, I mean the students. This depends on the way you give your idea to the students. You need to take some few minutes at the beginning to declare and to display your own idea about the new lesson, and this can be done through a short lecture, or displaying a video, or creating a real situation, or presenting something as a brainstorming, Then you have to think of the strategy, the method of teaching you will use in order to deliver your ideas to the students. I think the best one is dividing the class into groups. If the class is full of students, and it is hard for you to divide the class into groups, you can welcome pairs. And if you have a fair number of students, you can divide the class into small groups, and you give each group a different task, and they work collaboratively, pertaining the worksheets they use on the tables, or at the tables. At the same time, you think of jigsaw groups, how to divide the class into groups, and then you divide them into expert groups, and you select one from each group to come to the board and to present the ideas or the discussion. And one of the most important strategies is questioning. And questioning is something different from questions. Questioning is the strategy of asking questions. It's very important to know how to ask questions. It's very important to be a skilled questioner. You know, it's a matter of why. It's a matter of wondering. It's a matter of divergent questions, not convergent or factual questions. When you ask a question, this means that you are addressing the higher level order thinking skills of the students. Ask them to analyze. Ask them to evaluate. Ask your students to create, to compare, to summarize, to elicit the ideas. So help them to develop their thinking. Let them know how to think critically. This is the way you ask questions. Regarding the fourth domain, which is the professional responsibilities. In the professional responsibilities, every teacher has his own job description, and you have your own responsibility toward the school, the staff, the students, the parents, and all the stakeholders of the school. Here we have to three elements in this domain, reflecting on teaching, communication with families, and growing and developing professionally. When it comes to reflecting on teaching, actually, when you are observed inside the class, the job of the job of the coordinator is not to hunt your mistakes, is not to catch the errors or the mistakes you commit inside the class. It's not like this. It's a way to know the areas of strength and the areas of weaknesses. It's a way of adjusting your methods and your way of teaching. It's a way of coaching and it's a way of mentoring. So the job of the coordinator is to notice something and to come out of the class and to talk with you about it, just like this. It's not a matter of evaluating using marks and telling you something that you don't like. It's actual constructive criticism. It should be like this. So the ultimate goal of the evaluation is not to say you are good or you are bad. It's a way to adjusting your performance inside the class. And the second element in this fourth domain is communicating with families. Families are very vital factors in the process of teaching and learning. Communicating with them, they have to know about their kids in the school. They can share, they can give you ideas, they can listen carefully to you. They have the right to visit the school. They have the right to know about their kids' behavior and performance. And they are one of the stakeholders of the school. You know, in Europe and everywhere nowadays, they participate even in establishing the vision and the mission of the school. They share the school policies too. So communicating with families, this can be done directly via WhatsApp, and this can be done by technology via programs like Pioneer and others. The last element of the fourth domain is growing and developing professionally. I cannot imagine that you are a teacher without developing yourself. You need to read, you need to know, you need to go and to have training about a lot of things. You need to have your own self-development, self-assessment too. It's not enough to just to be graduate of a faculty of education and to say, okay, I'm a teacher right now. No, every day is new, and in every day there's something new for you and for the others and in favor of the school and your students too. So you have to read much. You have to have a very good background about psychology, about teaching, about methods of teaching, about you need to increase your culture too, especially the means of communication with the students and parents, besides the psychological issues. When you consider finally, when you consider the four domains of appraising, and the 13 elements of the four domains. And when you put them in your mind and consideration, so it will be easy for you to be evaluated by others, whoever the ones who will visit or pay a visit to you. Thank you very much.